All right, so with the conclusion of RBY OMPL, 1v1, we're getting a bit of a congregate VR, and I wanted to, submit mine. And I figured instead of writing things out, it would be interesting to maybe do a video explaining my rankings, as well as maybe even being a bit of a follow up to the original RBY info dump I posted a while back now. It's been a long time, my god. I'll just get right into it. I know a lot of people are putting Tauros first now, but I personally am a big fan of Lax. I think I use this comparison weirdly often, but I view it similarly to Alakazam meta GSC 1v1, where I had Raikou as the best in the tier with Alakazam right behind it, where Raikou is just more generally like reliable, while Alakazam could definitely be better and was the one that was banned, but is it's like I don't want to say cheesier, but like it's less honest. I mean, not saying Snorlax is super honest. Nothing in this tier is honest, but you get my point. Hopefully, we did see a lot of Snorlax innovation. A lot more counter was being used, which I'm a big fan of counter. Reflect was being used a lot to try to beat Tauros more, because a lot of people were using Tauros more, which makes sense. Same thing with counter. Counter also helps in the mirror. Reflect also helps in the mirror, to be fair. I think even some toxic stuff got use. I think rest was used once or twice. Um, I just think Lax is the easiest mon to put onto a team. I think I definitely understand why people are putting Tauros first. It's just I think I value the reliability of Lax. Um, but I have Tauros right next to it. So Tauros, of course, has very very few negative matchups, and even its weirder matchups, it always has outs with Stomp flinches, which it has been running a lot of Stomp, Body Slam paras, and its high crit rate, alongside Stab Hyper Beam, of course. Um, Pretty much its bad matchups are like T-Wave, Reflect Chansey, Reflect Snorlax, and then Articuno. And then if it's not running Earthquake, you have like lower tiers like Gengar, Rhydon. Um, and also I guess like Thunder's Jolteon, which I'll get to later, but it just has such good odds into so many matchups. A set I saw a lot during OMPL was Body Slam, Hyper Beam, Leer, Stomp, and you just give up all your coverage to hit Gengar Rhydon because they're pretty easy to cover anyway, and you just have odds against so much. And like Stomp isn't that weak, especially coming off Tauros. So one flinch or one body slam full para, it's just kind of over. One crit as well, because Tauros is a crit machine. Uh, like picking Tauros is almost never bad. I do think there's a world where this guy gets banned. I have no idea how I feel about that right now, but I still think I would put it second in the VR. But when the actual full VR comes out, I think it's pretty likely that it'll be first. We'll see. And then Alakazam third, I think, is a pretty common sentiment. There are just outside of the two Pokemon above it, there just aren't really many reliable answers to Alakazam. Um, like Thunderwave, Zapdos can do well into it, but people, and by people I mean I think it was mostly just Bandit, were running some Thunderwave on Alakazam, and also some people have been running Counter, and then even lowering the defense EVs, and well, stat experience, but in the builder they're EVs, and also your IVs. I believe it's like if you hit, I could be wrong, but I believe it's 52 EVs and then 2 DVs, because you need 2 DVs to have 15 HP. You can kill Snorlax clicking Body Slam with counter into Psychic. Though it's probably better even to maybe even go lower. I'm not too sure. I haven't looked into this that much, but I think counter might even be able to kill it from full if you lower your defense enough. The only thing is, of course, with that route, is then you just drop to a raw Hyper Beam. But it's still definitely an option to go, and I think that was a very interesting innovation in the tour, is just dropping your Alakazam stats in a metagame where you are able to have maxed out EVs. But yeah, Zam is still, you're still able to run the classic Psychic Toxic Sub Recover set, and just beat most special attackers, other than what I mentioned. Jolteon can do some stuff with like Tail Whip, Hyper Beam, Tail Whip Pin Missile can do some stuff. But Alakazam's Alakazam. You still have Psychic with your high crit rate, high special stat, high special drop chance. It's Alakazam. It's ridiculous. I think Chansey after that. Having a good matchup into Tauros and Snorlax is great. I know some people running Toxic plus Seismic Toss. I'm not really that sure how I feel about it. I still think the best set is the Ice Beam T-Wave Reflect Rest, but I can definitely see why people are running that. I think just having a positive Tauros matchup is huge in general. And of course, you also just do well against a lot of special attackers, like the Zapdos, and then if you're running T-Bolt, stuff like Starmie as well. The Starmie has actually been running Toxic a bit, and I think Toxic Starmie is the future. That's why I actually have Starmie higher, but we'll get to that. Yeah, I think Toxic as a whole has picked up a lot, just because Rest is so hard to run when you just get crit or special drop with Psychic down. And then also, I will say, I think it has been less of an emphasis on freeze fishing. Makes my old thumbnail for the RBY info dump a bit outdated, I guess. But, I think with the higher emphasis on higher damage normal types with Body Slam or Alakazam with Psychic, Jolteon being used a lot more, it's just harder to freeze fish because you just don't last as long. Critical hits just do so much damage. But yeah, I still think Chansey's good, mostly just because Reflect, being able to wall Snorlax, being able to do well into Tauros. I do think Chansey's also still solid at freeze fishing with Reflect against Snorlax. So now we have Jolteon. I believe in the original video, I mentioned like T-Bolt, Pin Missile, Toxic Rest, and then like Thunder Wave's an option. And that really being the only stuff Jolteon ran. Now Jolteon has a lot of options. Tail Whip is just really big for it. Tail Whip Double Kick does really well into Chansey, even if they were to run Rest, which I think they can nowadays. Pin Missile, of course, is still nice for Egg. Thunder is good into Tauros. I believe it's actually favored into the Tauros matchup because your crit odds are higher. Of course, Thunder doesn't have the best accuracy, but, being good into Tauros is nice. Leer Hyper Beam is great. Not Leer. Tail Whip Hyper Beam is nice into Alakazam. Yeah, and just being the fastest viable mon, the tier is great. You have the highest crit rate, you outspeed everything. You have pretty good odds into everything as well. Similar kind of to Tauros, but only thing is your physical defense is a little awkward. You lose to Lax most of the time. You don't have the best matchup into Tauros, especially without Thunder. But yeah, I think Jolteon has kind of proven itself with its versatility. Now we have Starmie. I think the old Reflect sets are definitely out. I think Toxic Starmie has a lot of potential. Basically the same exact set as Alakazam, being Psychic, Toxic, Sub, and Recover. But you trade the Electric Weakness for having more physical defense. And the Electric Weakness isn't actually that bad because you actually do mathematically beat Amnesia, Thunderbolt, Snorlax. Which is a big reason why I thought Starmie was pretty bad for a while. But and in general, I think the Starmie has definitely fallen off significantly for a while. Like when I made the original video, it was considered like the second or third best mon. It's definitely fallen off significantly. But I think Thunder Wave has some potential because you can do decently into Tauros with Thunder Wave. I really like Toxic. I think maybe even Thunderbolt might do stuff. But I think the way to go is just the Toxic set because having physical defense is nice. Obviously, you lose to Alakazam. You lose to Zapdos. You do poorly against Jolteon. But it's a nice option. Now, Zapdos, I think, has fallen off a bit. Going into this tour, I actually thought Zapdos would do very well, but it really didn't. I think just Tauros is really annoying because it's really just like a 50-50 matchup for it, and with Stomp being introduced, it doesn't help. Starmie falling off really doesn't help. I think Thunder Wave's still the way to go, just like T-Bolt, Drill Peck, Thunder Wave. You can do well against Tauros, you can do well against Alakazam, You do well against Starmie, Articuno, Lapras, stuff like that, Executor. Like, you have a pretty solid matchup spread. The issue is Tauros is, like, close to a 50-50. You don't do well against Jolt or Lax, especially, like, Ice Beam Lax, so even some other Lax sets can do well into you, because you're dropping Reflect. You can run Reflect, but it's just awkward if they're running Blizzard. By the way, Blizzard is definitely much more common on Snorlax now than Ice Beam, because, again, Freeze Fishing is down, and Blizzard's damage against Zapdos and Rhydon is just huge. And same thing with Starmie, actually. Just in general, Ice Beam has fallen off. I think the only big mon I'd run Ice Beam on is Chansey nowadays. Maybe Articuno. Freeze Fishing's just rough. But the additional damage on Starmie helps against I think it's Executor, because otherwise you can actually lose to Executor, which is really sad. If you're running an Ice move. I believe with Substitute you just win, but if you're not running a Substitute set, and you want that Ice coverage, you should run Blizzard. But yeah, Zapdos definitely fallen off. Executor definitely doesn't appreciate the rise of Tauros, definitely doesn't appreciate Alakazam and Jolteon, but it still has a place as being the most reliable Snorlax answer, and doing well into Chansey as well. Great partner for Tauros, because Tauros can kind of handle most other things. Though I will say, a bit of a spoiler, you see that's right below Articuno's Venu. I do think with Lapras actually getting some use now, and Gengar falling off a bit, I think there's a world where Venusaur climbs around to the point of Eggy, maybe even surpassing Eggy. They're not going far beyond that, I think. Their matchup spread is very, very similar. Like I said, they basically just trade Lapras for Gengar. And Venusaur, while its bulk kind of hurts, its matchups don't really change that much. Also, just remember, obviously, I think most of you watching this will know this, the whole Pin Missile bugs hitting poison super effectively, so you don't beat Jolteon. You get hit. I mean, you can beat Jolteon. And the Toxic immunity is actually kind of nice against some Jolteon sets, which is also kind of nice. But yeah, I was just not comfortable putting Venu up there yet. I think I have this very conservative Venu vote. I still think it has a lot of potential, though. Back to Eggy. I think Eggy will always have a place in the tier for being the most reliable Snorlax and Chansey answer, especially with Snorlax running counter now, so Hitmonlee is rough. Also, Hitmonlee's just not good. It's just kind of annoying that Eggy just doesn't beat much outside of that. Also, keep in mind, or not keep in mind, but there was a little bit of innovation with Executor with a funny anti-Alakazam set. I believe it was Thunderwave, Double Edge, Psychic, Rest, which is a set I made on my team with Earthfurgle, which is funny, but it's not very good because you beat Sam, and that's about it. Well, you beat like Rhydon and low tiers like Gengar as well, but yeah, I just wanted to mention it because it's funny. Now, probably one of the bigger things going on, and this honestly could even be a bit of a low vote, I'm not too sure yet, but it looks promising, is Lapras. And the set we were seeing in OMPL was, I believe, Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Confuse Ray, and Reflect, though I think Rest might also do some stuff there. The idea is you're really, really bulky, and Confuse Ray is a really stupid move. With Confuse Ray, you have such good odds into... I'm not going to say such good odds, but you have solid odds into Lax, you have solid odds into... I even saw Lapras beat... there were two games, I think it was a Zapdos and an Alakazam, where it just won because Confuse Ray. Reflect also helps against Lax, of course. You don't have a great Tauros matchup, but it's not the worst in the world. Thunderbolt helps against non-Thunderbolt Starmie, and also Articuno. You outspeed Executor and just hit it with Blizzard. It's kind of nice, and I think it has some potential to even rise up a bit. I don't know, it's just kind of a new innovation, so we'll see how that goes. Now we have Articuno. I think Articuno, its biggest draw in general and also above Lapras would be just the Tauros matchup. You just click Blizzard into Ice Beam, I believe is optimal, and unless you get very unlucky, you win. I believe at least it's the most consistent, not normal type, and with the fact that its main out nowadays is Stomp, I think it might even be the most reliable. I haven't done the math on that, but I think Articuno, outside of that niche, is a bit rough. I mean, Thunderbolt, Chansey, and Snorlax are annoying. You don't beat Zam, you don't beat the Electrics, you don't beat Starmie. It's really just Executor outside of that, but it does still have a place because beating Tauros is always huge. Venu, we're dropping down to the C rank now. I think there's a bit of a drop, but Venu I think might be an exception, along with Electabuzz and Raichu, which we'll get to. Venu, I think, is potentially great, like I was talking about before. Just beating Lapras, Chansey, Snorlax, some Jolteons as well, potentially. I think it has potential. But I talked about it before, so I'll skip over it here. Gengar. I think the biggest thing about Gengar is the fact that Tauros has been dropping Earthquake. So there are some sets of Tauros that you just completely wall. I think Confuse Ray plus Toxic is actually pretty decent. You drop Thunderbolt because it was really only for Articuno and Lapras, which it's still pretty nice to have, obviously, but you don't necessarily need it. You can run Toxic, Confuse Ray, Psychic, Rest. You do well against a lot of Amnesia Snorlaxes. Reflect often runs Earthquake, but you do well against Amnesia Lax. You do well against Chansey. You do well against some Tauroses. Yeah, I think Gengar has some potential now, but I don't think it's great. I think it's definitely a bit of a drop-off. Rhydon, I think, in general, is a bit of a worse Snorlax most of the time. I think its biggest draw is the fact that you can run it alongside a different Snorlax, which, it's eh. I think Blizzard being used a lot more really hurts it. Blizzard lacks two shots it, or just kills it with Amnesia into Blizzard. Blizzard being used on Starmie. I mean, Starmie won anyway, but you get my point. I think similar to Gengar, its biggest draw is the fact that Tauros has been dropping Earthquake. So you can do really well into Tauros. Obviously, it's not foolproof, but like Gengar is. But, it's definitely an option. And unlike Gengar, you do well into Jolteon Zapdos. Yeah, I think maybe. So I'm going to get a drink real quick. Yeah, I'm likely to not edit this much besides making sure the audio is good because I want to get this out relatively soon. We'll see. Maybe I include a couple replays. I don't know. Anyway. So Electabuzz and Raichu I have next to each other, and this is honestly mostly a theory thing because this was brought up to me a day or two ago, at least at the time of recording this, by Sablette. Basically, these two Pokemon are able to do well into Jolteon with their higher attack stats and access to Body Slam. I think Electabuzz is a bit better because with its speed, it's able to beat Zapdos more reliably, I should say. I think the set on Electabuzz is T-Bolt, Thunder, T-Bolt, Thunder, Body Slam, Screech. With Screech and Body Slam, you do well into Jolteon. You also do pretty well into Chansey. Your natural typing allows you to beat Articuno, Lapras, Starmie. You beat Zapdos. I think it has a lot of potential there. Raichu is worse into Zapdos. But in exchange, you have the ability to threaten Surf on Rhydon. So if you value that matchup, Raichu can be the way to go. It also has Seismic Toss, which might come into play. And you can maybe run Toxic for something. I don't know. Again, like I said, these are very unexplored. This is more of a theory vote, but I think they have a lot of potential. Yeah. Let me scroll down a tiny bit. Forgot I unplugged my mouse. Is that good? Yeah, it's fine. So Slowbro, I think, has fallen off significantly because people have kind of just realized it's kind of a worse Snorlax, similar to Rhydon, but okay, this is actually bothering me. I'm going to scroll up a tiny bit more. My God, I'm so bad. I'll get it eventually. This is why I need a second monitor. Good enough. But people have realized that it's kind of a worse Snorlax. Unlike Snorlax, it's not really able to threaten much immediate damage. So you have to Amnesia up. I think the thing that makes Snorlax great with Amnesia is the fact that it doesn't have to rely on it. But Slowbro does. It also doesn't appreciate Thunderbolt being a very common attack nowadays from so many things. You lose to Egg, you lose to the Electrics, you lose to Chansey or Snorlax carrying Thunderbolt, you lose to Thunderbolt Lapras, I believe, as well. because they can confuse Ryu and maybe crit 3 with Thunderbolt. Uh, it's just kind of rough out there for Slowbro. Again, I think its biggest draw is the fact that you're able to run it alongside Lax, but even then, it's a bit mediocre. I think counter is probably the way to go, just to try to beat Tauros and Snorlax a bit better, but it's definitely fallen off. So Machamp is a newer-ish innovation. I came up with it a bit after the original video. Basically, my set is Submission, Low Kick, Earthquake, and Leer. And you have a positive Snorlax matchup. You do well into Chansey, and you do well into Jolteon as well with Earthquake, unlike something which you don't even see here being Hitmonlee. So, yeah, it doesn't beat much outside of that. It also beats like Rhydon, and probably the Electabuzz and Raichu as well. Maybe Psychic Electabuzz, I don't know. But, I think it's okay. I think it pairs really weirdly well with Zapdos. Like, I had a Snorlax Zapdos Machamp team, which matched up very well into most things. So, yeah. Flareon is another newer-ish innovation around the same time as Machamp, I think. The idea is that it has a very high special stat and can use Fire Blast with a 30% burn chance into Snorlax, which does pretty well, and then you also have that high 130 attack stat, so you can use Body Slam, Hyper Beam. You do well into Alakazam, you do well into Amnesia Lax. You even do well against some other special attackers like Jolteon. Of course, you beat Egg. It's just not the most reliable thing. Between accuracy, you have a low crit rate, and your defense stat is naturally kind of low, so it's a bit awkward. But I think it definitely is worth ranking. With the rise of normal types being much more common, and by normal types I mean Snorlax and Tauros, Jinx is just kind of meh. I mean, the fact that you're able to match up positively into Lapras and Articuno is kind of cool, though some Articunos have been running Double Edge, so that's something to keep in mind, or Hyper Beam. You match up well into Chansey and Egg, and that's kind of it. Like, the typing is just great, but the stats are just kind of not there. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. Like, if Jinx had Alakazam stats, I think I said something similar last time in the last video, but if Jinx had Alakazam stats, it would be insane, but it just doesn't, so. The freeze immunity is also just less valuable. It's really only valuable against Chansey, and I guess Lapras or Articuno playing for an out, though you might just lose to Confuser anyway. Kabutops, I put up here in C2 instead of D, mostly just because the same reason of Rhydon and Gengar. With Tauros running less Earthquake, it can potentially wall that. It can potentially wall non-Thunderbolt, non-Earthquake Lax, which isn't that many of them nowadays, but it definitely is still some. You beat non-Thunderbolt Chansey. Not much else besides that, honestly. Maybe I could put it in D, but either way, I believe the Congregate VR is mostly about order. So I think Kabu here is fine. Sandslash after that. You do well into a lot of Laxes, as long as they don't have Blizzard. But you're kind of just basically a worse Rhydon that does better into Rhydon. Though there is a bit of a problem. Like, you do worse against Reflect Lax, I believe, which is pretty significant. Well, actually, no, because they run a move for Rhydon, meaning they would run a move for you, I guess. Because, I mean, you're immune to Earthquake. There was a reason I'm blanking on. I think it is just the Tauros matchup, because unlike Rhydon, of course, you don't resist normal. So you just kind of lose to Tauros, which is rough. I think Clefable is, it's an interesting mon. It might be unranked in the future. It might even be unranked in this. I'm not sure how many people have ranked Clefable. But I think it's interesting because you are kind of like a crappy Snorlax, but you do well into Egg because you outspeed it. You can click Blizzard into it. It's just the stats are so significantly lower than Snorlax that it's rough to make it work. You also don't have nice voice crack. You don't have Amnesia, which is rough, but I still think Clefable has some potential. Maybe with Bolt Beam, maybe like 4 attacks or like 3 attacks counter. I think it can maybe do something in like a tournament setting. I think it's D rank worthy. And my last inclusion here is Primeape, which again, it's a bit more of a theory thing. It's just the fact that, like, also keep in mind that Machamp and Primeape both lose to Tauros. Just something to keep in mind. Unless maybe the cheeky counter. But Primeape, it does positively into Snorlax. And you have Rock Slide to hit Articuno, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, it's just Articuno, Chansey, Snorlax, which is a pretty good team, but that's kind of all Primeape does in my experience. Again, potentially worth on ranking. This D tier is kind of on the edge. I also want to mention two Pokemon that aren't here, or maybe even more than that. I think Moltres is just kind of bad. Fire Blast is just unreliable. Like I said with Flareon, obviously the 30% burn rate is great, but it's just rough having both the electric weakness and the ice weakness because fire doesn't resist ice. You kind of only beat Egg, and you beat Egg kind of, or mostly Tauros, and then some Snorlaxes, which like other Mons can do kind of better. Like Articuno. Obviously, you also beat Articuno, but I just don't think it's worth running. And there was another Mon. Why am I blanking? I guess Hitmonlee is worth mentioning. Yeah, technically, mathematically, it has the best odds in the Snorlax. But one, Snorlax has taken a bit of a step off, and two, besides it and Chansey and Lapras, it just doesn't beat anything. I just don't think Hitmonlee is really worth running, especially with counter being more common on Snorlax. So you have to win that 50-50. If you think they're counter, you have to click like Meditate or Sub. So it's just kind of awkward. But yeah. Let me scroll up again. That's too far. Oh my god, I'm so bad at this. I'm not editing this out though, because I want to get this out soon and I take forever to edit my videos. Little up. Good enough. Alright. But yeah. This is my tier list. I'm also going to post this video and the tier list itself in the RBY OMPL thread. Or not OMPL thread, but the other metagames thread. And I'll put a link to that in the description if you're interested in checking out the other people's rankings. And eventually when the Congregate VR comes up, which I'll probably maybe even put like a comment with that as well. Who knows? I also put out another video recently about Little Cup 1v1 Hisui and Zorua. So if you're interested, check that out. Thanks for watching.